What I want to talk about today is a little bit of a follow-up really on all of the content and cases and information that's been put out there about the Supreme Court case that recently decided the issue of the definition of sex being male, female in relation to transgender people. Now, I don't want to focus actually on the case because I think there's been a lot out there about this and I've done an article on it on my website. But what I do want to focus on is just a reminder to everybody that there are protections in place from discrimination and harassment for transgender people. And this is covered by the Equality Act. So regardless of the decision of the Supreme Court in relation to the definition of who is male, who is female, there is protection in place from discrimination. In particular, I'm talking about here in regards to the employment context. Now, the decision, in my view, of the Supreme Court about this issue really focuses on things around the provision of services and participation in sports, that sort of thing. And of course, there are things in there that employers and employees need to be aware of, but it doesn't take away from the fact that trans people have rights under the Equality Act and should be treated fairly in accordance with those rights. So critically, under the Equality Act, there is a listed protected characteristic in relation to gender reassignment. And so this applies to those people who are either transitioning or have transitioned or intend to transition. And what it means is there's protection for people from the moment that they decide that they are going to transition or they propose to transition. So there is already protection in place. It is listed as a protected characteristic in much the same way as things like disability, age, race, religion, those sorts of things. And it's important to note as well that there is also protection in place for people who may be perceived to be transgender. So even if somebody isn't transitioning or has transitioned, if they are treated to their detriment because somebody perceives them wrongly to have transitioned, then they would also have protection from discrimination. Now, what we're talking about here are things like direct discrimination. So that is where somebody is treated to their detriment because of their gender reassignment. Now, this could be a situation, for example, where an employer refuses to hire somebody because they have transitioned or they are going to transition in the future. So if they have refused to hire them because of their gender reassignment, then that would be direct discrimination. There is protection in place from indirect discrimination. So that is where somebody, like an employer, puts in place a provision, criteria or practice that places somebody who is transitioning or has transitioned at a detriment compared to their colleagues. The next area where somebody who is undertaking a gender reassignment or has done would have protection is in relation to harassment. So that is where they are treated in a way that creates an intimidating, hostile or degrading or offensive environment for them. And this could be something like repeatedly misgendering somebody at work, or it could be making offensive jokes about gender reassignment or trans people. So they would have protection in relation to harassment. And then finally, the other area of protection under the Equality Act is in relation to victimisation. So if somebody raises a grievance or intends to bring a claim or makes a claim in relation to discrimination because of gender reassignment, and then they are treated further to their detriment or they are some way penalised or punished because of that, then they would also have a potential claim for victimisation. So the purpose of this video is just to explain again and reiterate that although the Supreme Court case has set out the definitions as far as the law is concerned under the Equality Act of what male, female and sex is, this doesn't take away the protections in place for those people who are undergoing a gender reassignment, intend to or have done already. They do have that protection from discrimination and harassment, and that includes direct discrimination and indirect discrimination. Now, my focus is on employment law, and so we're talking about this in the workplace context, but it also applies in relation to the provision of goods and services, and also in relation to education and various other areas in life. Now, it's really important, in my view, if you are a service provider, you're an employer, or you're an educator, that you really understand the differences here in relation to what's happened with this case and the law that applies in relation to equality. And really, the main thing, the main message that I always want to give in regards to this is to be kind. These laws and protections are here in place for you and to protect people. But ultimately, when you're dealing with someone, you are dealing with another human being, whether they're male or female or whatever they were assigned at birth or whatever gender they are now. You need to deal with people with kindness. We're all human beings, so don't forget that. And as long as you keep that in mind, when you're dealing with colleagues, friends, family, anyone that you will have contact with, then you are less likely to run into difficulty in relation to your legal obligations or the law. If you have any questions about this or anything you want to say or any comments, please leave them below. But remember, please be kind in your comments.